ceremony for me really is, it's the way that you engage with life. It's just a shift in the way that you engage with life, and attuning and attending to just dropping into a different level of attention and care, and really coming home to, oneself and the moment.
Today's Unreasonable Human talks to us about the importance of ceremony and how we can bring the sacred into our everyday lives. She is a seasoned ceremonialist, and she holds an honors degree in medical and psychological anthropology with a focus on rites and rituals. Her name is Eve Gaines.
Hi, Eve.
Hi, Erica.
It's so lovely to have you on the show. Thank you so much for agreeing to be on the show. You're very much an unreasonable human in a very beautiful way, and I love what you do in this world. So I'm very excited to share what you do and how you came about it. So let's start. Let's start with a little bit of background in you. I always love giving people context. So I would love to know, first of all, where were you born, Eve?
I was born in Toronto, Canada. I lived there until I was 7 years old. And then we moved to Vienna, to Austria. And I was there for 4 years. And from there, we moved to, when I was 12, we moved to New York City, to Manhattan, which was a pretty profound culture shock. And then I'm giving my whole life trajectory. And then I ended up for college back in Canada, in Montreal, and then sort of completed the circle back to Toronto before meeting my partner, Glenn, and landing in Los Angeles for much of my adulthood. So it's sort of like a long, circuitous, windy road to get here, but Canadian originally, which was your question.
So you are a ceremonialist. That is what you are called. And I am so intrigued as to what brought you to become what you've become. So you when you went into college, you ended up studying, it was an honors degree in medical and psychological anthropology with a focus on rites and rituals. So rites and rituals, I mean, it's not something that people will study every day. It's not a very common thing for people to do. What brought you to want to study that?
Yeah, no, for me, honestly, I sometimes joke that I think I opened up the course catalog and sort of landed on the A's because my minor was in art history. And I just, when I began exploring anthropology, and when I stepped into first beginners classes in anthropology, and then pretty swiftly was in a medical anthropology class. I probably, because of the whole journey of my own, where we were on this planet, and sort of getting to know myself in the context of different cultures as a young person, and then just observing sort of, challenges in my own family, with friends, around health, wellness, a sense of well-being, this lens that was open to me through medical and psychological anthropology, which is really the exploration, the understanding of how health and wellness are conceived in different cultures, what participants in the culture feel, supports and enables their sense of living a healthy life, and also, an exploration of different medical systems. But for me, because I was focused on rites and rituals, it really became about how, and that was sort of the lens that was kind of blasted open for me and really began to expand my perspective. I always joke, I have a daughter in college now, and, that the function of this higher education is really to, to expand our perspective and to give us new frameworks for understanding the world. And that was really what started happening when I was exploring these ways that in other cultures, spirituality, a sense of there being ceremonies, rituals, times that really supported and honored transition, challenge the intimate, inextricable bind that existed between people's sense of health and wellness and their own sense of connection with their path, with one another, and with the divine. For me, it was like this whole way of being human that felt so connected to, I think, who I just came in. I think we all as children come in with our own sense of what we're drawn to and what we're attracted to and how we spend our time. And when I go back into, the recesses of my mind as a child, so much of what I did was, create these sort of ad hoc, now I can call them ceremonies for things. I was always so interested, as I think so many children are, in what was happening in the season and in, just really feeling, and also just awestruck at any time I perceived that sense of reverence and community gathering in order to observe something, whether it was, a holiday or a special moment. I remember just feeling that so profoundly, just even in watching kind of my family dynamics and feeling the space in my home shift when we said a prayer, when there was a conversation that went deep. And so for me, the academic path, it's interesting because, I kind of joke that at the time I really wasn't thinking about where this would lead me as far as career path. It was not, the field of, the field of ceremony, and the way that now there is a new sort of reawakening and remembering and prioritizing of this spiritual layer in Western life and the life that we lead here. That really wasn't happening then. So it was really sort of choosing this path and just really trusting that what I was exploring and the way that it was making sense to me, it was interesting enough to hold my attention for a long, long time. And it kept prompting me to go deeper and kept prompting me to really reflect on my own life, my own experience, and to provide it with different, with different context. My honors thesis kind of in particular was a chance to, I wrote it on female adolescence and the lack of life cycle ritual and anorexia nervosa, and the way that, asking the question, can this disorder that is at the time was so epidemic, and I really, hurts my heart to feel into how prevalent it still is today, but really looking at how this disorder, questioning whether it could be a manifestation of a lack of a meaningful rite of passage for young women, and in having so many conversations and interviews with young women, just hearing that, their symptoms, their beginning of this path really started with a desire to connect, a desire to have ritual in their own lives, a desire to understand what it meant to be initiated into the world of womanhood, and feeling so lonely and lost in that. And feeling a sense of pressure.
Yeah. And I think that's really what the lack of ceremony in today's world, because there is a lack of ceremony. We've really moved away from it, I think, in the last 100 years. Or, it definitely feels like ceremony was always such an ancient practice. I mean, we all know we sit around a fire.
Yes.
As soon as we sit around a fire, there's this connection to something greater. Everybody just gets quiet and or even if there's a lot of conversation, I've noticed every time I sit around a fire, there's always a moment that people take for themselves to just watch that fire. And so we know it's in our cells, it's in our
it's
DNA.
innate.
Yeah, it's an innate thing. And we've been sort of shifted away from it with technology. And yes, like you say, now we're starting to understand it again and sort of almost long for it. There's that longing for it.
Yeah.
So we're trying to institute it into our lives again. But there's still such a lack of it in today's society. You know, why do you think that is? Why do you think that we have this lack of this lack of understanding how important ceremony is and the sacredness of ceremony in today's day and age?
Yeah, such a beautiful and complex question, and really a question for our time, because I do think that a lot of this separation, really arose with a sense of, interestingly, of being rational, which is why I love the title of your podcast, because there's this, as soon as we give primacy and priority to the rational, then we move out of our sense of lived experience and the miraculous and the and those things that we can't control, that we can't have, that we can't really dictate, that sense of being human as being this vast and expansive experience. And I think, what has happened with the Industrial Revolution, what's happened with the scientific revolution, I oftentimes look at it through the lens of the development of Western medicine. It's really this, this sort of making things, distilling things down to their essence so that they can be studied and made sense of, which is seen as sort of accruing knowledge. But unfortunately, what that does is it separates us from our intuition, from our ability to, to connect in an interdisciplinary way, to connect in this like profound sort of knowledge of like being part of a constellation instead of being part of a single star or a single, pillar of knowledge. So I think, even in my, my academic studies, I had a continual desire to like sort of bridge these worlds. And that was, that was not something that was encouraged. And I think in life, and as you mentioned, with the advance and of technology, I actually feel like we're in kind of an interesting age with that too. I feel like there has been this sort of, there's been like kind of a antiseptic, like, just we're going to live in this very kind of pure mental, we understand the world, we can make sense of it way, to, I do feel that technology now has evolved to be a connective force in this fascinating way. That, these are tools that humans have created. And I just have been loving sort of looking at and reflecting on the ways that ultimately they are bringing us back into connection with ourselves and into deeper understanding of what's happening in the world and how we make sense of who we are, not without challenges, and there is also, the flip side of that is the isolation that we're seeing.
Yes, and it's like an ironic thing, because there's that isolation that it brings, but then what are we all seeking in it? Connection.
Yes.
So it's like, that's for me where ceremony is the deepest form of connection that we can have with other people in our community, with ourselves, with our higher beings, with whatever it is that we connect with. If it's the universe, if it's God, if it's universal love, ceremony brings that all together. And it's just, it's something we know when we're in ceremony, We know it. People step into ceremony and there is something that they just understand. There's an understanding that something sacred is happening.
This is it.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
what, because we've spoken about this before, about how, in many tribal traditions, still to this day, there are many rites of passage. There are many ceremonies revolving around stepping into new ways of being. And there is a big disconnect with a lot of people transitioning into adulthood and into maturity, and women even moving into their adolescence. There's many cultures who do ceremony around it, but in most of the Western world, it's not really. You don't have a ceremony when you first, start your cycle.
Definitely uncommon.
No.
Yeah.
And then with older women, we've spoken about how older women don't have this rite of passage moving from being the mother years, whether you've had children or not, the mother years, moving through into something that is very different. We sort of have this void where we don't know what we're stepping into. So we're all trying to stay young. We're all trying to keep ourselves in this like young mother phase, when that's not the biologically and the natural way of being. And ceremony feels like one of those things that is lacking in today's society that can bridge all of that together. So how do we go about doing that? How do we go about bringing ceremony into our lives so that we can feel a sense of place, a sense of understanding of who we are, a sense of understanding and respect for the people in our communities and what they're going through and where they are? How do we bring that into our lives?
Yeah, this question really speaks my heart language, because this really has become, I'd say, my vocational path. It's become, it's what I love to look at and support in the world. I do feel that, as you so eloquently said, there is really not a reverence for maturity in our culture, and especially not for female maturity, for what it means to be a woman. It's rare that, as you said, the young women are supported through their transition, and that sort of began my interest in this topic, in looking at how we can kind of mend this lack and create meaningful ceremony that isn't appropriative, but really just comes from creating something that is of resonance. And as I've aged, our life paths have such fascinating ways of revealing themselves through our own experience. And so as I passed through my years of motherhood, I spent so much time in women's circles and in this phase of mothering and creating ceremony for women who were becoming mothers, for women who needed to grieve their own lack of mothering in their lives, for women who were trying to support their young children, trying to be, the type of partner that they wanted to be when there was a lack of modeling of that. Which really felt, it allowed me in a very private and organic way to deepen the types of ceremony that I offered and the ways that I understood how this could emerge. And, more recently, what has been really exciting for me as I reach this next phase of my own life, and transition into a phase of maturity, I've really been sort of studying and applying what I've seen among friends and then in wider circles of what is lacking for women as they reach maturity. What's preventing us from, stepping into this sense of self-sovereignty with the same assurance that men step into, their years when, they They aren't questioning that they should be now CEOs of their companies, and that the wisdom that they've gained and the life that they've led has imbued them with a sense of mastery. And really, for women, I feel like there's some inhibition around stepping in and truly acknowledging our sense of mastery, truly, celebrating ourselves and the making meaning out of, and then bringing our own accrued knowledge into being so that we can step into the most mature version of ourselves, so that we can be those elders that that society longs for, needs, so that we can provide true leadership. So a lot of my recent work has been with this phase that I love to call, entering the wisdom years. And entering the wisdom years really for me means that, it means honoring that stage that I think probably because of our longer life cycle exists now, which is the stage, we go through maiden, the traditional phases of life that are honored in women's life cycle are maiden, mother, crone, which kind of condenses our life experience and presumes that once we have transitioned out of this motherhood stage, and this motherhood stage also, I just want to take a beat to acknowledge that whether or not you bring children into the world, this is your time of fertility, fecundity, this is your time of birthing in the world. This is when you have a sense of vitality, and when your energy is appropriately directed, I think, most women feel appropriately directed into the care and support of one's own family, of one's own, business, if that's what you're growing, of one's own community, of the world, in this very, beautiful and uplifting way. And then, if we moved into the next traditional phase, it would be the phase of the crone. But that really, for women who are shifting out of motherhood, out of active motherhood, we're always mother, we're always all of these things. We always carry the maiden, we carry the mother. But as we come into our own maturity, into our own sense of who we are in this world, what it means to have our own unique life experience, I really feel like there is this other phase that, was kind of was described to me as a magi phase, as a phase of being the magician in one's life, the self-sovereign person who can now take and distill her own experiences, her own knowledge, and really be in the world, lead by example, use her voice as a form of guidance, and also know that, that sort of outward facing care isn't necessarily the energetic. I know you and I have spoken about this before. As our children get older, it's not what our children even require from us through their later adolescence. Definitely not in their young adulthood. They're not looking to be, zoomed in on and micromanaged. They're looking to us to cultivate relationships with us as adults, for us to respect their independence. And then, with this, there comes the other kind of the lack that I perceive in our society, which makes this transition challenging, which is that in traditional societies, where different phases of life are honored, there really is a more active, there's more active participation, community participation in our lives. So we get the sense, that it's not, the burden doesn't fall on us alone to raise our children, that the lives that we're leading are, part of this whole that allow us. One of my most beautiful and treasured teacher always spoke about, that we're each here to do our one thing. And that Western women, especially Western society, though, in general, had this misconception that, we all needed to be that we all needed to be generalists, that we all needed to do everything.
Mm.
And she always really, kind of with with force would say, if you'd all just remember that you're here to do one thing, then it would allow everybody else to do their part. And then, then community, then society, then these things that you're looking to fix would just fall into place. Because we're not here to do it all.
Yeah. And wouldn't that just be what the ceremony does? Because at the end of the day, ceremony, anytime I've experienced any type of ceremony in my life, you walk into the ceremony, a lot of the times, not 100% certain what's going on sometimes, but when you step into it, something is happening. There is a definite shift, an understanding of what of when the ceremony happens. And when you walk out of that ceremony, you're very clear on what has happened. Whether the ceremony was for you or not is not the point. The point is that ceremony allows people to understand their place.
Yes.
In whatever is happening. And it's almost like you say, with the situation with women who are reaching an age where they've now come out of this mothering phase. They're not ready for the crone phase. I mean, we know this. I'm in that phase. And I'm very far from the crone phase. Thank you very much. But I see all around me, what I see all around me is I see a lot of people who are confused and lost. And I think it's because and I see it with adolescents. I see it with like boys. I see it with men. We have forgotten where we step into things, and that's why when you look at cultures who still have a form of ceremony, like say in the Jewish culture, the bar mitzvah and the bat mitzvah, those are very specific ceremonies, and these kids are going to it very proud.
Yes.
Anytime anybody, they understand they're stepping into another phase of life. But with kids who don't understand that they're growing into another phase, it's super confusing for them. And then it keeps on happening throughout our lives. So
this is it.
Yeah. And so the importance of ceremony just feels like it has sort of moved away, but in some cultures people are holding on to it. But it's interesting. Like, I wonder if people fully comprehend that, ceremony, there's a big difference between growing up in being educated in a specific way and then wanting to do your own thing. I'm one of those unreasonable people. I was brought up in a Portuguese culture, and there's a lot about the Portuguese culture that I moved away from, but I am fully in love being Portuguese. But ceremony is not about your education or your culture. It's about you and connecting with something that is not something that is an academic thing that can be taught. It's not something that your parents get. It is higher than that. It feels like something greater than that.
Completely. And I really feel, it's an intrinsic human language that I really feel is our birthright to engage in. It's not something that needs to be taught. At the same time, as you said, they're beautiful traditions that do, but more than that as well, I do, what you referred to is really ceremony's power to remind us of, as the beautiful quote goes, to remind us of our place in the family of all things. So, it's this idea that we, and I agree with you, when we step into ceremony, when we support ceremony, when we're even a bystander to ceremony, we do have this sense of respect and reverence, that something special is happening, and that a lot of it is, not within our control. It is, I love when I'm preparing to create a ceremony, I love the sense of just trusting my intuition in terms of what I bring. Just watching the magic that unfolds. Oftentimes the ceremonies that I will hold will be like an open call to ceremony. So I won't know everybody who's going to be in attendance, but as you begin to witness and hear from the people who have come, there's always this sense of it being a crystallization of exactly who needed to be there. That the magic that is created in this particular constellation of people with this particular, at this particular time, in this season, at this moment of the day, it could not have happened otherwise. And I think, as you said, we all have, we have a sense of how to participate in ceremony that doesn't require teaching. It just really is something that our spirit knows. But at the same time, that the kind of flip side for that, you were also talking about how young people, the sense of being lost. And I do think, ceremony also does have the power to hold space for these larger teachings. Yeah. And for me, it is, my looking specifically at rites of passage, looking specifically at these phases of life that were traditionally held so that people could cross thresholds where they would see themselves differently and where society would see them differently. Because there are three phases of a rite of passage. There's severance. There's when either you are maturing into something that you have never been before, or an experience happens after which you will never be the same version of yourself. So there's this, these times are going to happen whether or not we ceremonialize them. Mm-hmm. There will be times when we will change. So this severance is really, it's attendance to those times and giving the individual or the cohort, the group of individuals who are going through this transition, whether it's being honored as an individual or collective ritual, the space to be on their own, and to be away from the regular, everyday kind of mundane requirements of them. But in that time away, especially if it's a rite of passage, for adolescents, there is a stepping in of an older cohort, not one's parents, but this older members of the culture who might be the generation directly above, and then, some of the elders who are imparting wisdom, who are witnessing this transition through the middle phase of the rite of passage, which is the liminal phase. It's this phase of having sort of left one side of the riverbank and being in the current before you reach the other side. Mm-hmm. And, our culture is very adverse to being in something that's not well defined. Mm-hmm. I think, not only do we not have these ceremonial experiences, these rites of passage to help and support people, but we also tend to either really rush this liminal phase where we're like, oh my goodness, I'm changing. Okay, I've changed, I'm done. Mm-hmm. Or because we don't have guidance, accompaniment, support, even just simple like love and honoring through this liminal phase, we become stuck in the liminal. And so a lot of what, you're saying about people being lost, I would say is really that. It's, because the third phase of a rite of passage is a phase of reincorporation. Mm. And reincorporation is when you, as the initiate, come back to your culture. Or to your group, to your tribe, to your clan, to your family, to your community, and you have a chance to reintroduce yourself and to be witnessed as this new version of yourself. And so in this witnessing, which I feel like is such a, we have such a dire lack of this in our culture, this ability to, so many of us, we go away, even, a lot of the work that I used to do, it's like we go away on these retreats, we have these profound experiences that can be initiatory. Mm-hmm. And then we come back and we're greeted as if we're the same person that we are when we left. Yeah. And there isn't this sense of reacquainting yourself with the people in your life, with your culture, with your, even in your life path as this person this newly emerged person that you are now. And that's what I love to create and make space for.
You've touched on something so huge there, because I think that is where a lot of generations struggle nowadays, because there's like a whole, the divorcing parents. I don't know, there's a phrase of going around at the moment of like people divorcing their parents or whatever it is. Basically cutting ties with their families because the way that they are doesn't work. The way that they were doesn't work with their family now. But that is what ceremony is about, and that is what is lacking in today's society, is people are not given the space to change. They're not given a space to be somebody new. And in ceremony,
yes,
people are allowed the space to literally become somebody new, and then the community sees that new person and accepts them and welcomes them in. So that is where there's a big like brokenness in the society, because
completely.
It's not that like cultures have just been the way that they've been, and now there's this new generation and they're like, I'm not going to be that way anymore. It's not about that. If you're in ceremony and your community has to accept you for the new person that you are, then you are going to be who you're going to be.
You are going to be who you're going to be, and the people around you will change as well.
Yes.
And I think that's we aren't designed to be static. And these systems that we live in, we're all designed to change. And that's one thing that I love about ceremony is, yes, it might, you might be a participant. It might not be a ceremony for you, but by virtue of participating in the ceremony, by virtue of even just being a bystander, as you mentioned before, you are forever changed. You are forever altered because you witnessed this moment where there was a different order established. And I do feel like that is the power of ceremony, whether it's, the routine honoring of a cycle of, so often what we know about ritual and ceremony now has been sort of almost co-opted by religion. So we have to look at it through that lens and kind of acknowledge that it can be, something as simple as honoring a particular day of the week, and just this shift that happens as we, palpably adjust and change, or, it can be a ceremony to honor a season, or to, as we were talking about, to honor a phase of life. But in witnessing somebody else's change and evolution, and honoring change and evolution of the planet, all of these beautiful ceremonies that are very universal. Also about, I love always looking at astrology, looking at, pagan culture, these things that we can't help but be changed by, whether it's the phases of the moon, whether it's the shortening of the days, whether it's the, the bringing in of the crops. There are times when we remember that we are part of cycles of change. Yeah. And as we go through cycles of change, there is this sort of helical, I don't even know if that's a word. There's a spiral that happens where our change is given context, and we begin to see each other differently. So I agree. It's really, there's a profound, there's a lack of being able for us to support our own changes. But also, one thing that I love, I don't feel like, I've studied this, but I feel like I've studied it in order to share it. And I don't feel like, you don't need a ceremonialist to create a ceremony. We all can access this. We all have what we can do for ourselves and for each other in such a basic and simple way is honor these times of change. And as soon as we do that, as soon as we, do that for whether it's somebody in our family, our friend, a colleague, then we immediately feel that shift, I think, in, what you were speaking to, where we move into feeling a sense of a different quality of what it means to be human.
Yeah, it's like a reverence. It's a reverence of life. For me, that's what ceremony feels. The smallest, like I think, and you know, I, I think I unconsciously partake in ceremonies all day, every day. I like
Yeah.
when I light a candle. For me, that's a ceremony. For me, when I have a bath, that's a ceremony. For me, when I walk in nature, that feels like a ceremony because I feel a reverence for something greater than me, and I feel a connection to everything around me. And I think that is what ceremony has always been from the dawn of man, is because we always knew we were connected to something greater than ourselves. And
This is
through the ceremony, that's what we did. So I'd love to talk about how people can bring ceremony, just into their everyday lives. People who don't think that they think of a ceremony as something bizarre, something
Mhm.
that's not. What are some ways people celebrate ceremonies that feel like we wouldn't even realize that there are ceremonies, but they are?
Yeah, I think, I think what you were talking about, ceremony for me really is it's the way that you engage with life. It's just a shift in the way that you engage with life, and attuning and attending to just dropping into a different level of attention and care, and really coming home to oneself in the moment. So as you said, something as simple as lighting a candle can definitely be a ceremony. I think anytime, I've found in my work, anytime that we are interfacing with any of the elements, there is this immediate, whether it's a cup of tea, whether it's a glass of water, a candle, fire, as you mentioned before, when we're like out in a storm and the wind and everything, all of these things kind of naturally bring us. I feel like they're those subtle reminders. They're those beckonings of the world wanting to engage with us on this way that is just more attuned. And I do think that, ceremony doesn't have to be this profound reach. It really can be, it can be part of your everyday, from just taking a moment before you step into your day to wake up slowly, to remember the things that you're grateful for, that to remember to sort of put yourself into the flow of sending a prayer for the world before your feet land on the ground. Then as you move into your day, it is that preparation of the first cup of tea. For me, I'm, one of my few last vices is my coffee, and I drink it in profound reverence and ceremony. I love, I add a shake of cinnamon to it, and there's something about that just, I love also, one of my favorite ways I love flowers, and grow different medicinal plants, but even just, composing or choosing some seasonal flowers to have in your home, it really just shifts the whole vibration of your home, and brings that sense. I do think that there's also sort of an intimate bond between this sense of ceremony that we're talking about, and between our appreciation of beauty.
Yes.
So I really do feel like beauty is this sort of like messenger that weaves through the world, that reminds us of how sacred and special things are. And then, there's also what we're doing here with one another, of engaging and talking, and the care that you bring. And this would really be my biggest piece of sort of advice for anchoring into, whether or not so many of us are, we might have grown up in one tradition, traveled to a different place, not felt resonance with the religion we were brought up in. We may be these sort of like melding kind of configurations of little pastiches of different cultures and different experiences. But I do think that something that we can do is create the space for dropping into intentional community and conversation, whether that's, having a practice of counsel that you use in your home when things become challenging or when you want to address larger situations, or whether it's, something that has served me profoundly throughout my life is having a women's circle, having a group of people who I was part of a women's circle that was active for over a decade. And really guided not only me, but each of our family members, gave us this thing to anchor into. And we met once a month. But it was a time when, when there was just a reverence and an honor for hearing each other, for coming together with authenticity. And what was so interesting, which I was just spending time with a friend who has participated in this, and we were remembering that even when our children were little, we'd rotate, which house this circle would happen at. And even when our children were little and they'd see us, they could immediately sense that something special was happening. There was, and they'd speak about it, they'd speak about like, oh, you're all coming today. And, there was just this sense of like quietness and respect, no matter how sort of boisterous and loud our families usually were on these mornings that we gathered, everyone treaded tenderly and made space for what was happening to really be prioritized. And I feel like, I feel like that was so beautiful to be a part of, but it was also a beautiful example.
Yeah, it's a beautiful example. It's so easy for people to do, for women and men, just getting a group of people together once a month. And, I think the thing with, it's not just getting together and like having a couple of beers, and it's not about that. It's about knowing that you're coming together for an intent, like intentionally coming together. And when you do that, what I've noticed whenever I've led circles with people, I've noticed that the moment it's in a sort of ceremony or sacred circle, there is space for every person to be seen, because many times we're in social situations. There's, people who are more, confident, or people who are more talkative. And, a lot of the times the conversation will become, peripheral, maybe not even go very deep. But the moment you're in a circle where every person is seen, there's something about that, about the human being seen, that is very profound, because so many people are not seen on a day-to-day basis. So,
this is
it.
No, and there's a beauty that happens as well when we're in circle and attending to each other's voices, where I always feel like we're weaving a prayer. But so often, what you're saying about each person being seen, but I think also for each participant, it's having your truth be expressed by someone else too. So often, right? We don't need to say everything that we're experiencing, because someone across the circle will mention it and will speak to it, or someone next to us will say that, what we've been either challenged with or what we've been carrying in our heart as a prayer. And so there is this sense of, of being seen in a profound and meaningful way. And I agree that there is, that it's sort of like this like hearth light that just kind of, everyone, I think, looks so beautiful in ceremony, because we all are listening from our hearts. So there is that beauty and that radiance, but there also is, I think, this sense of being in a shared experience of being alive on this planet and not walking our paths alone, that we all long for. And and it's profound, and it's something that I think I said before, we all have a birthright to, we all have, ritual is a universal language. It's something that we can use in our own ways. I don't think we should shy away from, creating for ourselves, for those that we love and care about, for the world at large, also using the tools that we feel comfortable with and attracted to heighten our sense of connection.
Absolutely. I think that's very important to know that you can't do ceremony wrong. You can't create a ceremony incorrectly. If you work from your heart and if you create something that is intentional and from your heart, you can't do it wrong. So anytime you can, I've heard of people doing ceremony. I mean, my one good example that I have in my life of creating ceremony in the most bizarre way was when I was having my first child. I'd planned it completely. I was going to have a water birth. It was going to be a hypno birth. I was going to do no drugs. There was nothing. And it was going to be in a birthing clinic, a very beautiful, special birthing clinic. And my son was breached till the very end. So I had to change the plans and I had to go and have him a C-section in the hospital. I was devastated by it because I had this perceived idea that the ceremony could only happen in that very sacred place that I had chosen. And then I took some time to think about it and I realized I can bring ceremony into a very sterile setting anyway. So what I did was I took, I had my birthing music and I wrote a letter because I knew it was going to be hard for me on the day to voice it. So I wrote a letter, and before everything started, I asked everybody to just take a moment to listen to me. And I read what was on the piece of paper. I can't remember what it said, but it was something about them to please understand that even though they do this on a daily basis, probably 10 times a day, that what was happening right now was that I was bringing a new life into the world. This new life was entering into this world and I was changing for the rest of my life. So I asked them to honor the fact that something very, very sacred was happening, even amidst all the stuff going on. They something in that room shifted when they understood that. They lowered the lights for as long as they could with whatever they could. They played the music. Everything felt so very sacred. And it was just because I stepped into a space of asking others to be sacred with me. So that, for me, is a very good example of how ceremony can happen anywhere in this world. You can make it happen for yourself. So I would love to urge people to just really find ceremony in their everyday lives. Like you say, my cup of tea is my daily ceremony.
I love the story that you shared, Erica, too. It's and I relate to it from my own birth experience. And it's such a beautiful example of how it's in these spaces where, the profound effect, I'm sure, for your birth, but also for these doctors, nurses, for all of them to remember, you were drawing people into this experience in a place that I feel like, there needs to be a re-remembering. And that's a gift that you imparted, in your son's beginnings. And it's something that I'm sure left an impression and probably a sense of profound remembering and maybe a different attitude, as they engaged with the rest of the operations that they had. Who knows? But I do feel like, just that bringing ceremony into the places where we don't expect it to exist.
Yeah.
And, for me, especially that intertwining of, to go back into that medical piece. Some of the work that I'm doing these days is with people who are navigating real health challenges, and creating these wellness sabbaticals, these like programs of inclusive and immersive health that aren't, they're not designed to fix. They're not Western medicine, but these can be people who are navigating things as profound as cancer and being, kind of siloed in terms of what treatment looks and feels like. And weaving in then, partnering with practitioners who have incredible ways of bringing healing into its more sort of divinely aligned, revelatory, interdisciplinary magic. There can be this accompaniment. These two things don't have to exist. They don't have to be separate.
Oh, it's so beautiful. I've loved this conversation. I feel like if everybody could just look at their own lives and see how they can create ceremony and have fun with it, have fun with the things, just to think about how you can make a space more intentional with whatever it is, whatever message you're wanting to convey, with whatever is happening in your life. And also to understand that if you're going through some form of a transition, allowing your friends, family, community to be a part of that. So say, for example, a woman or a man gets divorced, having a ceremony where you're stepping out of that married life into your newfound single life. It's such a beautiful way of people understanding that there is a definite shift. You are somebody different. It's such a beautiful, empowering thing. And with your children, especially too, right?
This is it. No, and I think it's honoring, we spoke about the big life transitions that will naturally happen, but there also are those, like, as you were saying, there's divorce, there's moving, there's changing jobs. There are, there's also these times in our children's lives, like, the transition that we just had of sending our child to college, these things that they're massive.
Yeah.
They're massive. And if even, in our circle of care, and the people who we call our community, who, we carry with us in our hearts, if we're available to them, to witness, and to also just be those indicators of oh, wow, I can see you're changing.
Yeah.
What can I hold for you? What are you, what are you in the messy middle with? That's sort of like the other phase, the other name for the liminal. It's like this messy middle that I think that some of us, all of us, we really spend a lot of time, like it or not, in this space. And the more versed we get with ceremony, the more we do allow it to, to be a part of the smaller moments of our lives, the more ease we have creating it, and the more ease we have stepping into it when we do have those bigger, more monumental shifts happening.
Absolutely. Well, Eve, thank you. I love I've really, really enjoyed this. We could carry on. We could carry on for hours, but I'm going to finish it here. And I'm going to finish it with my 3 unreasonable questions.
Beautiful.
All right. So, Eve, what's the most profound ceremony you've ever been a part of?
Yeah, this question makes me sort of go through my own whole Rolodex of experience. But to be most honest in this moment, I have to say that the ceremony that's really alive in me today is the one that I took part in yesterday. And it was a ceremony that was very intimate. It was a ceremonial space that a dear friend and somebody who I often lead ceremony with held for me. It was held up at our retreat space in between the rainstorms that we just had. So it was, the rain had just passed, and it was this beautiful time of, the sun was streaming, and I have been doing a lot of work in my own life to clear some ancestral pieces that I feel have been inhibiting my own ability to parent through this stage of life, and just things that this is my birthday week. So it felt like a perfect moment. We've been talking about having this ceremony for a long time, and it just felt like, again, that sense of perfect alignment, we were like, when is it going to fall on the calendar? And it happened to be this day. Yesterday, there was, a Kazemi, there was this Mars and the sun made a conjunction, and I have so much Scorpio in my chart, which is the season that we're in. My Mars is in Scorpio. So for me, it was this moment of just being recognized, being supported in my own healing, being in this space that I've created to love up and support others. And I just feel profoundly grateful for the simplicity and the layers that were able to be shed by being witnessed and understood.
That's beautiful. All right. My second question is, what is the greatest gift ceremony has brought to your life?
I guess it really is for me that it's expanded my deep sense of trust. It's been a way of engaging with life that has allowed me, as I mentioned in this conversation, to really rely on my intuitive guidance and my sense that there isn't, I think we all have our own life traumas that we carry. And my response to that is this level of like hypervigilance that I feel I need to be doing and controlling. And whenever I shift into ceremony, I'm always reminded that all I need to do is just take that next step, and that I'm supported and guided, and that that there's a magic that we can't control that's going to show up naturally.
Oh, yeah, that's very special. Yes, to all of that, I agree completely. All right, so my last question is, Eve, what is your definition of an unreasonable human?
So my definition would be that an unreasonable human is one who is engaged with their life path in a very active and emergent way. It is that sense of following one's passions, whether or not they seem to make sense, following one's sense of values, and also allowing for the pivots, allowing for the changes, even when they seem, not to make much sense or to be a little ridiculous. And it's also just having this sense of, of exploration that I love whenever I get into conversation with you. I feel like, I don't know where it's going to lead, but it's fun and we're in it and we're doing it, and, not conversation, interactions. So I think it is just that sense of living life in the spirit of exploration.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, what a great conversation. Eve, I'm going to have you on again one day, and we can go deeper into specific ceremonies that people can do. We didn't even touch on ceremony when it comes to death. There's so much to go through with all of this.
Oh, I'd love to talk to you anytime, Erica.
Well, thank you so much. It's a beautiful conversation, and I can't wait to be in ceremony with you sometime.
Yes, I'd love to have you up I'd love to have you up, and let's continue on.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Eve.
Thank you, Erica.
Very special conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's been such an honor and a privilege to be with you today.
Well, that's it for today's episode of Unreasonable Humans. Thanks so much for joining me. Please follow the show wherever you listen to your podcasts, and remember that a great rating goes a very long way to support the show. Until the next one, bye.